We should have known the moment we stepped into that chapel. Something was terribly wrong. Their eyes. That's what I remember first. Not the altar. Not the music. Not even the vows I practiced until my throat cracked. I remember their eyes, wide, glassy, fixed on us like we were meat, and they hadn't eaten in centuries. And not one of them blinked. Did you see them smile? I whispered to Jonah just before we said our vows. He squeezed my hand and smiled too wide. Like his mouth didn't want to move that way but had to. He didn't answer me. He wouldn't look back at them. I was never meant to marry into the Lorne family. Jonah told me they were traditional, that they kept to their own, that the ceremony had to happen in Hollow Vale, that the guest list was non-negotiable. He said it with this look, like he was repeating something drilled into him. Not something he believed, but something he feared. He never let me meet any of them until the night before the wedding. They're old-fashioned, he warned again, adjusting his cufflinks with shaking fingers. You'll understand when you see them. I thought he meant they were rural, reclusive, maybe cultish in that eccentric aristocratic way. But I didn't expect this. The pews were filled, but the air didn't feel full. Felt still, like time had stopped to let something slip through. Every guest wore black veils, gloves, tight collars. Not a single face moved, not even when the music began. Just row after row of statues carved in wax, with those wide, blinkingless eyes reflecting the candlelight too brightly. I tried to spot Jonah's mother, his sister, the cousin he once said saved him from drowning. But they all looked the same, silent, pale, staring like they'd already been buried and dug up for this exact moment. "Do you take this man?" the officiant began, but I barely heard him. I was focused on the front row, on the woman in the center. She tilted her head the moment I looked at her, like she'd been waiting. Her veil slipped just enough for me to see her lips. They weren't closed. They were moving, repeating something, over and over. First, I thought it was a blessing, prayer. But then I realized she was mouthing my name, my full name, my childhood name, the one no one here should have known. She mouthed it like a warning, or a curse. I blinked, and in that split second her face was wrong. Not her skin, not her expression, her bones. Her cheekbones had moved, shifted, as if something inside her was adjusting. After the vows, they all clapped, but the sound was off, dry, hollow, like dozens of hands clapping out of sync with reality. And when we turned to face them, their mouths were all smiling. But none of their smiles reached their eyes. None of them looked happy. They looked hungry. I should have run. I know that now. But Jonah looked so relieved, like some invisible weight had been lifted from him the moment the rings touched. And for one fleeting second I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was nervous. Maybe the chapel's lighting was just old. But then, something changed. I heard it. A whisper somewhere behind the organ pipes, like breath dragging through broken teeth. "One is enough." And that was when I looked at the guest book and realized my name wasn't written in ink. It was scratched, etched in something red and still glistening, right below the last name written. Jonah's first wife, the one he said died in an accident. But the date next to her name? It was yesterday. It's strange how something so small, so quiet, can detonate your entire reality. I stood frozen, my hand hovering over the guest book like it had teeth. The name before mine was scrawled in jagged, frantic strokes. Lucinda M. Lorne. Signed, June 17th. Status, wife. The ink wasn't black. It shimmered red and thick, like it was still wet. It smelled metallic. And beneath her name, just below the word wife, someone had carved a line so deep it split the paper. Returned to them. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until Jonah touched my elbow. His hand was warm, too warm, like he'd been sweating through the whole ceremony. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. I looked up at him, blinking too fast, my mind clawing for logic. "There's another name before mine. Lucinda. You're first." His smile didn't fade. It just held, frozen in place, like a mask glued onto his face. "She didn't belong," he said. And then he pulled the pen from my hand, flipped the page and ripped it out. No one else noticed. Or if they did, they pretended. The guests were still sitting, still watching. One of them tilted her head again, the same eerie angle as before. She didn't blink. She didn't move. But I swear to God, her smile grew wider when the page tore. As we walked out of the chapel into the overcast courtyard, Jonah whispered, "Don't look back." His voice cracked on the word look, like something sharp caught in his throat. Naturally, I did look back, and I wish to God I hadn't. The chapel windows, those tall, dusty stained glass windows, were now filled with faces. Not silhouettes, not shadows, faces. Dozens of them, pressed against the glass from inside, mouths open in grins too wide for their skulls. Eyes gleaming, teeth visible. They weren't looking at Jonah. They were all staring at me. The reception was held at the Lorne family estate, or as Jonah called it, the Hollow House. It sat on a hill choked with fog, its silhouette jagged against the sky, windows like eyelids forced open, shutters crooked, like someone had tried to escape through them. Inside, everything was too old. Not antique, just untouched. Dust floated in thick shafts of gray light. The chandeliers didn't sway, but something in the air did. Something that watched. "Where's your family?" I asked Jonah as we walked into the main hall. The room was set up for dinner, plates already filled. Every chair occupied. But no one moved. No one spoke. And they were already eating. Forks rising to mouths that never chewed. Hands trembling slightly, in perfect sync. As always on me. Jonah didn't answer. He just took my hand and said, "They're happy you're here. They've been waiting." I sat. I didn't want to, but my legs moved on their own. The chair was too cold. The cushion sank like something had never gotten up from it. To my left, a woman in a black veil leaned slightly toward me. She hadn't said a word all night. Then, without turning her head, she whispered, "They chose you." I turned. Her mouth wasn't moving. Her eyes weren't open. But I swear I heard her say it inside my head. I grabbed Jonah's arm. Hard. "What does she mean? Who chose me? Why does everyone here look like they're embalmed?" Jonah didn't look at me. He stared down at his plate of untouched food and murmured, "You're the last one they'll need." That's when the lights flickered. Just for a second. And every guest, at the exact same moment, turned their head to the left. Not like people. More like birds. All in unison. All toward the hallway that led to the basement. And then the smell hit me. A thick, rotted iron scent. Like blood and wet earth sealed in stone. And something else. Lavender. Faint. Powdery. Like an old perfume. Like Lucinda's wedding bouquet. Still rotting somewhere beneath the house. I stood. Jonah grabbed my hand. "Please," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet. You can't leave until the toast." I yanked free. "I'm not staying in a house full of corpses." He looked up, and his eyes were wet. Not from grief. Not from love. From fear. "If you leave now, they'll follow." I backed away from the table, heart punching my ribs, the veil of tension snapping tighter around my throat. And that's when I noticed the painting above the fireplace. An oil portrait. Old. Faded. But unmistakable. A bride. Smiling. Holding flowers. Wearing my dress. My dress. Her face? Lucinda. Eyes empty. Smile fixed. But scratched into the bottom of the frame. Barely visible unless you looked. She didn't run fast enough. The second I saw her face staring down at me, my face in that cracked painting, I knew I wasn't just some bride. I was a replacement, a duplicate, a continuation of something old, something cursed. Lucinda's face. It wasn't just a portrait. It was a mirror of what I would become. But it was worse than that, because just as I turned to run from that room, the portrait, God help me, blinked. Not a trick of the light. Not my imagination. It blinked. And a tear, thick and black, slid from one painted eye. I stumbled back, colliding with one of the veiled women at the table. Her body was cold, ice cold, and yet she didn't flinch. But I felt her hand reach for mine. Gently. Her skin was dry, cracked like parchment, and her voice, soft as a memory, brushed my ear. "He never told you the truth, did he?" I turned to Jonah, my voice shaking, louder now. "What truth? What did you do to her? What are they?" He just stood there, not blinking, not breathing. And then, like a switch flipped behind his eyes, he said in a voice too flat to be his, "She said no. You didn't." I ran. Not toward the door. It was gone. Literally gone. The entrance to the hall was now nothing but a wall of bookshelves. But the hallway to the basement, the one all the guests had stared at, was open. Waiting. And I don't know why I did it. I don't know what pulled me there. But something deep inside me. Asterisk asterisk, a whisper that didn't sound like mine. Asterisk asterisk said, "Find her, before they take your face too." The staircase was narrow and steep, lined with flickering candles that hadn't been lit earlier. Each one melted faster than the last, dripping thick wax like old blood. The smell of lavender grew stronger, but now it was mixed with decay. Rotting silk, damp stone, the scent of something buried. I reached the bottom and saw the door. Heavy, iron, bolted 3 times across. But the bolts weren't locked. They were pulled out, waiting. I paused, one hand on the cold handle, and that's when I heard it. Scratching. Not claws. Not nails. A spoon. Against porcelain. Stirring. The door creaked open. The room beyond was candlelit and circular, like an old ritual chamber. In the center sat a tea table with one empty chair. And across from it, Lucinda, still wearing the wedding gown, still with the bouquet in her lap. But her skin was dry, papery, cracked like a doll left in the sun. Her eyes were open, fixed on me, and she was smiling. But it wasn't warm. It wasn't hopeful. It was resigned. On the table was a guest book, another one, and next to it, a teacup filled with something dark. Too dark to be tea. I approached, knees weak, every part of me screaming to run. But then I saw what was etched into the table's edge. Whoever drinks, stays. Whoever refuses, replaces. That's when Lucinda spoke. Her voice was faint, brittle, like dry leaves being crushed. "He brought me here, said I was his forever, said I was the last. They always say, the last, until the house is hungry again." My mouth went dry. I looked at the teacup, then at her. "What happens if I drink it?" I asked. She looked down, then back up. And for a moment, just one, her expression softened. "You'll stay, but not like this." She held up her hand. Her fingers were fused together. The skin stretched, wrong, like wax melting into wax. The door behind me slammed shut. I turned, and standing in the doorway, backlit by candlelight, was Jonah. But not the Jonah I married. His eyes were darker, his smile too wide, and in his hand, another cup. He stepped forward and said, "It's time to decide, my love. Be mine, or be hers." I backed toward Lucinda. She reached out slowly, trembling, and handed me her cup. I stared at the thick black liquid, and something moved inside it. A face, my face, whispering, "You said yes. That means you belong." The walls groaned, the candles dimmed, and from above I heard the guests, laughing, a chorus of hollow, wet laughter that didn't belong to the living. And still Jonah waited. 2 cups, one choice. Lucinda's eyes were full of grief, and fear, and something else, hope. They say marriage is about choices, commitments, sacrifice. But no one tells you that sometimes those vows aren't between 2 people. Sometimes you marry into something else, something ancient, starving, and cruel. I stood between them, Lucinda, half woman, half wax. Jonah, too still, too smiling, with 2 cups in my hands. One held what looked like ink, or blood, or both. The other, I didn't know, but whatever floated inside shimmered like oil and bone. And it breathed. Lucinda's cup trembled in my hand. "Drink mine," she whispered. "And they won't take your face. They'll let you stay." I looked at her, really looked. Her gown was identical to mine, but the lace was rotting. The veil stuck to her scalp like skin, and her fingers no longer looked human. They had grown too long, joints fused together like soft wax melting over wire. Her eyes were pleading, but empty, like whatever had been her was just barely hanging on, wrapped in memory and regret. Jonah stepped closer, holding the second cup. His voice calm, gentle, too gentle. She hesitated. That's why she looks like that. I swallowed. My mouth was bone dry, my tongue too heavy. I tried to speak, but only one question came out. What are you? His smile flickered, not faded, flickered, like a light behind his skin was shorting out. You don't need to know what I am, he said. You just need to know what you are, and what you're not. Yet. He extended the cup further. Drink it and you'll belong. They'll leave your soul untouched. You'll walk in the light again. You'll keep your memories, your body, your name. He leaned in. But you'll never leave this house. Lucinda's voice cracked through the silence. He said the same to me. Then, years later, I heard him say it to another. And another. My knees buckled. I dropped to the floor, both cups still in my shaking hands, and screamed. Why me? Why any of us? Jonah's voice was soft, but behind him the walls began to move. No, not move. Pulse. Because the house is not a place. It's a hunger, and hunger needs memory, identity. It feeds on what makes you human. He crouched beside me, inches from my face, and for a single second, I saw his skin ripple. His jaw stretched too wide. His eyes blackened. Something beneath his skin crawled. I turned to Lucinda. Her lips trembled. Refuse both, she said. Don't drink. Break the cycle. But know this, they'll come for you. They always do. Jonah stood back up. You don't want to be what she is, he said. Half forgotten, half flesh, never dead, never free. He pointed to her with a crooked smile. She's a warning. I'm an offer. Choose wisely. The candles flickered violently. A deep sound shook the chamber, not thunder, not wind. A voice, older than language, lower than a growl, came from the walls, from the floor, from inside my bones. Bride, drink. And suddenly, the painting from the parlor, Lucinda in the dress, flashed into my head. Only this time, she was screaming in it. Her hands scratched against the frame, her mouth open in a voiceless wail. And above her, etched in fire, the house remembers. I stood, hands trembling, legs weak, and I did the one thing neither of them expected. I smashed both cups. Jonah screamed, not in pain but in fury. His mouth unhinged as black smoke poured from it, the air around him bending like heat. The walls shrieked. Lucinda backed into the corner, eyes wide. You fool, Jonah hissed. Do you know what you've done? I've chosen myself. The ground trembled. The table cracked. The guest book on the altar burst into flames. And from upstairs, footsteps. Dozens. Fast. Heavy. Wrong. The guests. Coming down. Jonah lunged. But Lucinda, what was left of her, moved faster. She threw herself in front of me, her body slamming into his with a sound like glass shattering under pressure. They hit the floor. She looked up at me one last time. Run. Take the book. Burn the names. End this. Then the house roared. A screeching, guttural sound that cracked the ceiling and shattered every candle. The last thing I saw before the light died? Lucinda's skin turning to ash in Jonah's arms. And his face no longer human. I turned and ran up the stairs, into the dark. And behind me, they were following, dozens of them, dragging their feet, laughing, calling my name. I didn't think, couldn't. I ran up those narrow, groaning basement stairs, the air around me thickening like wet cloth. Every step echoed behind me with something heavier than my own breath, footsteps that didn't belong to anything living. The house wasn't just shaking anymore, it was breathing. Its walls convulsed with a sound like lungs filled with rot. And the laughter behind me? It wasn't human. It wasn't even amused. It was hungry. I reached the main hall. The reception table was gone. The guests had left their seats but not their forms, because now they were everywhere, standing, lining the edges of the room, waiting. Each one turned toward me in unison, veils lifted, and beneath them, no faces, just slick, glistening skin stretched too tightly, like wax masks had been melted off to reveal the truth underneath. I clutched the scorched remains of the guest book to my chest, my fingers already blistering from the heat. Its edges were blackened, but the pages were still intact. I could see the names glowing faintly through the ash. Lucinda, and others, dozens, some signed in blood, some carved in ink, some scratched in by force. And mine was still there. That's when I understood. The guest book was the contract, the binding. They didn't need my voice. They didn't need my vows. They just needed my name. Written, claimed, owned. Jonah appeared at the far end of the hall, no longer hiding. His skin had begun to unravel, literally peeling back in strips like something inside him was shedding its human shell. His eyes were pits now, dark, deep, echoing with a hollow wind that made the chandeliers sway. And still he smiled. No one leaves with the book. His voice was layered, as if others were speaking through him. Dozens of brides, grooms, guests, all whispering through his throat. I ran, dodged between the faceless watchers. Their heads turned to follow me, mouths opening slowly, as if to scream or to inhale. I heard my name spilling from all of them in unison. She is not finished. She is not empty. Take her, fill her, bind her. The foyer door was back now. It hadn't been there before. But the house had changed again. It wanted me to see freedom, to believe escape was possible. But the door was a lie, because when I reached for the knob, my reflection on the door's glass looked back. But she didn't mirror me. She smiled. When I cried, she laughed. When I reached out, she clawed. She looked just like me, but she wasn't me. The guest book burned hotter in my hands. The names pulsed, and then one began to fade. Lucinda's. Her name was disappearing, like ash being erased from paper. And I heard her voice, just for a moment, in my head. You're breaking it. Keep going. I turned from the door, back into the house, into the hallway where the portraits hung. Dozens of brides, grooms, children, all staring, all trapped in oil and time. One painting cracked open as I passed. Not fell, opened, like a door in the wall. I stepped through. The room was small, circular, stone-lined, like the basement. At the center, a fire pit. Above it, a chandelier made entirely of bones. And in the pit, the original book, bound in skin, etched with names that stretched back centuries. And mine already there, even though I hadn't signed it. I looked around. All the guests were there now, surrounding the room in a perfect circle, watching, silent. Jonah entered last, his voice soft now, pleading, "Don't burn it. You don't understand what's at stake." I stared at him. "No," I said. "You don't. You don't know what it's like to be devoured from the inside out, to live in someone else's story, with someone else's fate stitched onto your skin." I held the book over the flames. His expression didn't change, but his voice did. "You think burning it ends this? It unleashes them." I hesitated. Then I saw it. Lucinda, standing behind Jonah, her eyes full of tears, her mouth silent, but forming two words. "Do it." I dropped the book into the fire. The moment it touched flame, the room erupted in screams. Not from mouths, from the walls, from the portraits, from the bones above me. Jonah lunged. The guests shrieked. And then everything shattered. The floor split open. The chandelier collapsed. And Jonah, whatever he truly was, caught fire. But it wasn't normal flame. It was blue, and black, and filled with faces, screaming, laughing, pleading. As they swallowed him, I hit the ground hard. Ash rained around me. The guest book was gone. The names? Erased, one by one. And then, silence. For the first time since I stepped into the chapel. True silence. I stood slowly. The walls were gray stone now. Plain. Lifeless. The portraits were blank. No eyes. No mouths. Just canvas stretched over empty frames. The guests? Gone. Jonah? Gone. Lucinda? Also gone. But I felt her. Somewhere deep inside. Free. I walked to the front door. This time it opened. No tricks. No mirrors. Just wind. Cold. Real. Alive. And as I stepped outside, barefoot and trembling, I looked back one last time. The house was no longer the hollow house. It was just a ruin. Empty. Starved. But I knew better. It was only sleeping. Waiting. For the next name. They say when you survive something unspeakable, your body forgets to feel safe. Even when the doors are open. Even when the air smells clean. Even when no one's watching you anymore. Except, someone always is. And the worst part? Now I think it's me. It's been 7 days since I escaped the hollow house. 7 mornings where the sun rose like it always had. Golden and indifferent. 7 nights where I fell asleep listening for laughter I should no longer hear. I moved into a rented room outside of town. No mirrors. No photographs. Just 4 white walls and a single window that won't open all the way. The landlord didn't ask questions. But on the 3rd night, he knocked on my door and asked, "Do you sleepwalk?" I told him no. He looked at me too long, his eyes darting to the hallway behind me. Then he handed me something wrapped in a cloth. It was a wedding veil, burned around the edges. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But instead, I opened the cloth with trembling hands and whispered, "Where did you find this?" He didn't answer. He just said, "That room used to belong to a girl named Lucinda. She left it suddenly, without a word. Years ago." Then he walked away. That night I dreamed of the house, not as it was when I left, but rebuilt, wider, hungrier. I stood in the chapel again, alone. The pews were filled with copies of me, some sobbing, some smiling, some wearing Lucinda's gown. At the altar stood Jonah, but not as a man, as a shape made of mouths and memories, all whispering at once. We never left. I woke to find the floor of my room covered in names, scratched into the wood, over and over, not carved with a knife, but burned in. Lucinda, Mary, Sarah, Hannah, and then repeated at least 20 times. My name. I tried to leave, packed everything, but when I opened the door to the hallway, I was staring into a corridor of flickering candlelight. The walls weren't white anymore. They were stone, damp, cold, and somewhere far ahead I heard it. A spoon stirring in porcelain. I slammed the door shut. When I opened it again, it was normal. Just my hallway. Just shadows and floorboards and cheap paint. But the sound followed me all day. Stirring, scratching, sometimes in the tap, sometimes from behind the closet. Once, from inside my own mouth when I brushed my teeth. I called the landlord again. Asked him if he knew anything about the house I escaped. The Lorne estate. He went silent, then said, "They burned it down, you know?" I froze. "Who did?" "Locals. Last night. Said it was cursed. Said they heard screams in the walls." I whispered, "I left it a week ago." "That's the thing," he said. "You told me that. But you checked in yesterday." I hung up and checked my phone. Every call, every photo, every timestamp, gone. Replaced by one photo, taken while I slept. It was of me, wearing the dress, and behind me in the mirror, Lucinda, smiling. That night I searched the internet, desperate, and I found something. A blog post, dated 10 years ago, titled, "I escaped the hollow house, but it's inside me now." The author, Lucinda, same full name, same face, same story, word for word. Even the wedding veil, even the guest book, even Jonah. I printed the post. The paper burned my fingers. And across the top someone had scrawled, "The bride always returns." The next morning, the dress was hanging on my closet door. I didn't put it there. It smelled like lavender. And when I tried to throw it out, it appeared again by sunset. No matter where I left it, dumpster, river, fire, came back, hung up, pressed, waiting. The part that breaks me? Sometimes I catch myself humming the wedding march, soft, under my breath, like it's not even me doing it. And worse, sometimes it sounds like two voices, mine and Lucinda's. I tried to tell someone, priest. He listened, nodded, then asked to see the dress. When I returned with it, he was gone. But etched into the church floor were 5 words. Too late. You wore it. I didn't survive the hollow house. I brought it with me, and now it's learning to wear my skin. My name, my voice. We like to believe identity is solid, fixed, permanent, something only we can define. But that's a lie, isn't it? Because sometimes, if a memory is strong enough, it becomes contagious. And right now, I don't know if I'm remembering Lucinda or becoming her. The blog wasn't just a story. It was a mirror. Paragraph by paragraph, I traced my own thoughts, my own dreams, even the scent hallucinations, lavender mixed with blood. Even the phrase I whispered when I saw the painting. She didn't run fast enough. Lucinda had written that, word for word. I found her final post, buried in code behind the front page. It wasn't public. The title wasn't a title. It was a question. How many times have I been me? I stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute. Then I opened the entry. It was a single sentence. They don't need the house anymore. They need only one of us to remember. That night, I heard her humming again. Through the walls, through the drains, through me. I tried not to listen, but it was my voice. Softer, higher, laced with panic I hadn't admitted yet. And when I finally fell asleep, I dreamed in her skin. I stood in front of Jonah again in the chapel. But when he lifted my veil, he gasped and said, in a voice that cracked like old wood, not again, not another one. I screamed awake, and sitting on my desk where my laptop used to be was the guest book. Not a photo, not a memory, the actual guest book. Its cover smelled of burnt fabric and earth. The corner still scorched from when I dropped it into the pit. But the pages? Perfect, pristine, like they'd been rewritten. And this time, only one name was inside. Lucinda M. Lorne. I backed away. My breath came short and fast, my chest constricting like the air itself was too thick. And from the corner of the room, a whisper. Say it. It wasn't my voice. It was older, hoarse, full of pain. Say the name, and we'll remember which one of us you are. I slammed the guest book shut, tried to rip the pages out, but the paper wouldn't tear. Instead, it cut me. Tiny slices along my fingertips. Thin lines of blood soaking into the parchment. And vanishing, like the book was drinking me. I lit a match, held it to the edge, but it didn't burn. The flame curved away from the paper like it knew better. And in the middle of the book, between Lucinda's name and the empty line beneath it, someone had written, memory is stronger than fire. I called a friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, just to hear a voice that wasn't echoing inside the house or my head. We talked for 5 minutes. And when I told her my name, my real birth name, she paused, then said, no, that's not right. I remember you. We were roommates. But your name was Lucinda. I hung up. Panic settled in my throat like ash. I checked every ID, every bank card, every email. And in every place, my name had been overwritten. Lucinda. I screamed, tore the veil from the closet, ripped the wedding dress apart, punched the mirror. But the reflection didn't break. It stared, and smiled, and whispered, you finally fit. The next morning, I walked into town, tried to check into a hotel. The clerk glanced up, frowned. Didn't you already stay here last week? No, I said. That wasn't me. He tilted his head. Strange. You even left your veil. He handed me a folded scrap of fabric. And I realized with horror, it was monogrammed, not with Lucinda's initials, but mine, in the same cursive that was in the guest book. That night I read the blog again. One paragraph had changed. It wasn't like that before. I know it. Now it read, The house doesn't need a door anymore. The bride is the vessel. Every time one escapes, she carries it forward. And under it, I'm sorry, but you'll do it too. I whispered into the dark. Lucinda, if you're still here, what are you now? The room answered. My voice, but not from my throat. From every object around me. The pillow, the walls, the window pane. Each one hissed back. I'm you. I tried to run. But no matter where I went, cafes, libraries, parks, someone would always look up and say, didn't you wear that dress last time? Or worse, you've been here before, haven't you? Even if I hadn't. Even if I swore I hadn't. Because now the memories were overlapping. The towns, the faces, the timeline, and the worst part? I wasn't sure they were wrong. I've stopped keeping track of what day it is. Time slips when memory starts breaking apart like wet paper. I wake up and the sunlight feels duplicated. The sky has the same cloud, in the same place every morning. My reflection blinks before I do. And now when I whisper, I'm not Lucinda, I don't sound sure anymore. Something has changed. It isn't just me forgetting. It's the world around me, rewriting. I walked past a newsstand today. Every headline read, Bride missing after strange ceremony. Town claims they've seen her before. They used my face. But the name? Lucinda M. Lorne. Same middle initial. Same smirk in the photograph. Only, I never took that photo. I went back to my childhood home, just to find something that remembered me the way I used to be. My mother answered the door with furrowed brows. Can I help you? She asked. I told her my name. She didn't recognize it. Then she looked closer, and her face drained of color. Lucinda, she whispered. But we buried you. My knees gave out. I didn't cry. Couldn't. Because some part of me wasn't surprised. The inside of the house was wrong. Family photos had been replaced. Not removed, replaced. My childhood face gone. Every frame held a bride. Me. Lucinda. Both. Neither. Different veils. Same vacant stare. In the hallway I saw a wedding invitation tacked to the wall. Not mine. But the name on it, Lucinda M. Lorne and Jonah Halson. Dated 5 years ago. I tore it down. My mother didn't stop me. She just whispered, in a voice that wasn't hers, the house can wear anyone. Then she smiled, but only with the left side of her face. That night I ran again. No suitcase. No phone. Just me and a name I was starting to lose my grip on. I slept in a roadside motel. Cheap. Hollow. The kind of place people vanish into. And when I woke, the wallpaper had changed. It was wedding lace. Intricate. Off-white. Stained. And on the mirror, written in condensation. You wore the dress. I screamed. Punched the glass. Felt it cut me. Deep. But the blood didn't hit the floor. It absorbed into the mirror. Disappeared. And in its place, Lucinda. In the wedding gown. Veil hanging limp. Face smiling but wrong. Like she'd never stopped smiling. I told you, she whispered. The house lives in memory. And now you remember. I looked down at myself. Still in the motel clothes. But my hands? They were laced with silk. Fingers bruised where rings used to be. A faint imprint remained on my skin. An invisible band. Like I'd been married for years. I turned on the motel TV to break the silence. It flickered to life. A static screen. Then, a wedding. Jonah at the altar. Lucinda walking toward him. But as the veil lifted, it was my face. Not recent. Older. From a version of me I don't remember becoming. And the preacher in the video whispered, not spoke. With this name I thee bind. I screamed and smashed the screen. The motel went dark. And in the shadows, I heard the guests again. Shuffling. Laughing. And worst of all, practicing my name. Over and over. Lucinda. 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 Until it didn't sound like a name anymore. Just a trap. I ran to the bathroom. Splashed cold water on my face. Looked in the mirror. And saw her eyes staring back. Not mine. You're almost ready, she said. I collapsed against the tile. trembling, burning. I pulled the guest book from my bag. I don't remember packing it, but it was there, waiting. The cover now had two names, mine and Lucinda's, but the ink connecting them was fresh, still wet, still bleeding, and underneath, a new message had appeared. One bride, one vessel, one soul at a time. I threw it into the shower, turned on the water, boiling, flooding, but instead of falling pages, the guest book began to hum, like it was singing, a slow, haunting version of the wedding march. And through the steam, Lucinda stepped out, whole, alive, eyes locked on mine, dress soaked, veil trailing. "You're the last piece," she said softly. "After you, we'll be real again." I backed away, but my body didn't move right, like I was fighting something inside my bones, something rooting itself into my spine, something growing. I gasped, because I felt it, not her taking me, but me becoming her. Do you know what it feels like to feel your own name slip from inside your mind? It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It leaves like a breath you didn't know you were holding. And when it's gone, the silence it leaves is unbearable. Lucinda stood there, soaked, silent, whole. She didn't blink, because she didn't need to anymore. I had become her eyes. The bathroom tiles were too white, too clean. It felt surgical, like the world had stopped being a place and become a table, and I was just one more thing to be laid on it. I stared down at the guest book, soaked but untouched, its leather binding still warm, still pulsing. It had never burned. It had never faded, because it didn't need to be destroyed. It needed to be finished. Lucinda took one step forward. Her veil dragged behind her, folding in on itself like smoke. "They promised me peace," she whispered. "But I was the first, and the first is always the prototype." She looked at me then, not with pity, not with hunger, but with recognition. "You were supposed to be the last. You fit the seams perfectly. I stitched the pattern. You just had to wear it." I backed away, but there was nowhere left to run. The mirror showed three versions of me: the girl I used to be, the bride I became, and the face beneath the veil, Lucinda's. I grabbed the guest book. It hissed in my hands. Names bled across the page. Some I'd seen, some I hadn't. But one thing was clear now. They were all me. Different times, different bodies, same script, over and over. Always the same house, always the same dress, always the same ending. I screamed, "What do you want from me? What haven't I given?" Lucinda didn't smile this time. "Not what you give, what you remember." The book pulsed once, then again. And on the final page there was a mirror. Not a drawing, an actual reflection. Moving, real. I saw myself, but not like before. I was standing at the altar, guests behind me, Jonah in front of me. Only now I saw the truth. He wasn't human, never had been. He wore skin like a priest wore robes. And behind him the house loomed, not as a structure, but as a living mass of mouths and eyes and memory, feeding on moments, feeding on us. Lucinda stepped closer. The mirror inside the book rippled. All we ever were was a menu. "But you," she pointed at me, "you are the last dish." I dropped the book. It hit the tile with a sickening wet sound. The mirror shattered. Not the one in the book, the one on the wall, and from it poured faces. All mine, laughing, crying, screaming, begging. They swirled around me like wind, like a hurricane of memory. And I remembered all of it. Every time I'd been the bride. Every time I'd walked down the aisle. Every time I'd screamed Jonah's name. Every time I'd opened the wrong door. Every time I'd smashed the cups. Or drank. Or refused. None of it had ever mattered. Because the house didn't want my choice. It wanted my consistency. It wanted the pattern. And I had given it that. Again. And again. And again. Lucinda knelt in front of me. Her eyes were softer now. Older. Wiser. "But you're remembering too early. You're not supposed to wake up until the next cycle. That's how it stays fed." She reached out a hand. "We can end it. Together." If we remember at the same time, if we both hold the moment, we can tear it open. I took her hand, and the veil dissolved, and suddenly, I was at the altar again. Only now so was she. 2 brides, 1 dress, 2 lives, 1 fate. The house screamed, literally screamed. The walls cracked, portraits burst into flames. Jonah stepped forward, but his body was already tearing. Skin sloughing off in paper-thin sheets like old wallpaper. "And oh," he bellowed, "you don't get to erase the story." Lucinda turned to me. "Don't erase it. Rewrite it." We knelt before the guestbook. This last page was still blank. I picked up the pen. Lucinda placed her hand over mine, and together we wrote 1 sentence. "This time," she walks away, and everything stopped. Not exploded, not shattered. Stopped, like time had paused, like the house itself was waiting for something it had never seen before. A story it didn't recognize, a moment that didn't feed it. I opened my eyes, and I was standing in a quiet field. The sun was rising. The veil was gone. The book was gone. Lucinda was gone. But I was whole. I walked into town. No one stared. No one whispered my name. I passed a store window, checked my reflection, and for the first time, it matched. Not Lucinda, not the bride, just me. Later that day, I passed a wedding in a park. Couples smiled. Guests clapped. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something in my chest. Fear? No. Memory. But it didn't hurt this time. It just faded like a dream you choose not to remember. And that night, as I lay in a bed that was finally mine, I wrote in my own journal, "I am not her. I was never her. I survived her. And the house does not own me." Final note, they say haunted places burn. But sometimes what haunts us isn't a house. It's a story. And the most dangerous ones are the ones we keep telling ourselves. You were the bride. You remembered. You rewrote the ending. Now the house is empty. If you want more chilling true crime stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the Veil of Secrets.